When I purchased a new house, my parents arrived with an unexpected demand. They insisted I hand over the property, claiming it was a family asset and therefore their right. I'd been eagerly anticipating my birthday for weeks, viewing it not only as another year but as a chance for a fresh start. I spent months organizing a small family gathering at my place, cooking my favorite dishes and preparing everything meticulously. I hoped it would be a celebration of togetherness, perhaps even an opportunity to mend our strained family bonds. As my family arrived, I welcomed them, exchanging polite hugs and smiles. For a moment, I let myself believe that, maybe, this time would be different. The first hour went smoothly. We chatted about small topics, and I managed to ignore the usual tension that seemed ever present during family gatherings. I wanted so badly to believe they were truly there to celebrate my day that I brushed off the subtle signs, side glances, murmured exchanges, and the way my father seemed unable to meet my eyes. Then, just as we were about to have cake, my mother cleared her throat, drawing everyone's attention. "Alex," she began, her voice unsettlingly calm, "there's something we need to discuss." A chill swept over me as I put down my fork, a heavy sense of dread settling within me. "What is it?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady despite the racing of my heart. She looked at my father, who gave a nod of approval. "We think it's time for you to move out," she stated bluntly, her words sharp and unyielding. "You've lived here long enough, and honestly, you're not contributing as you should. It's time for you to understand what it means to be independent." I was speechless. The words felt misplaced, as if I were struggling to fit together pieces of an incomplete puzzle. "What? What do you mean?" I managed to stammer, my mind frantically trying to catch up. "You heard your mother," my father interjected, his tone harsh and final. "We've done enough for you. You're ungrateful, and it's time you stop taking advantage of us. You have a week to pack and leave." I scanned the faces around the table, hoping for any sign of disagreement, a signal that this was a cruel joke, but my siblings averted their gazes, their faces emotionless, as though they, too, had anticipated this moment. "But it's my birthday," I whispered, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. I'd invited them to celebrate, to share in this one day that was supposed to be mine, and now they were taking even that away. "That's exactly the problem," my mother said, her tone laced with irritation. "You think everything revolves around you, Alex, as if we owe you something just for being born. Well, we don't. It's time for you to grow up and stop expecting us to fix your problems." The words cut deeper than I had imagined possible. I'd always known our relationship was complex, with unspoken grudges simmering beneath the surface. But I never thought they would go so far as to choose my birthday to cast me out like I was nothing. I stood up, the floor feeling unsteady under my feet, my heart breaking as I looked at the faces of those I thought I could trust. "Fine," I said, my voice trembling. "If that's how you feel, I'll go, but don't expect me to come back." Without another word, I turned and left, my chest heavy with a mixture of anger, betrayal, and sadness. I had only the clothes I wore and a few things I grabbed on my way out. As I walked down the street, tears began to flow, each one a bitter reminder of the family I had lost. For days, I drifted between friends' couches, trying to make sense of what had happened. I replayed the conversation repeatedly, searching for clues I might have missed, but no matter how many times I relived it, the pain remained a persistent ache that wouldn't fade. Eventually, I knew I had to move on. I couldn't keep lingering in uncertainty, letting their betrayal shape my life. I had to prove, if only to myself, that I didn't need them, that I could stand alone. I found a job, nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills and threw myself into it, working long hours and saving every bit I could. It was exhausting, and sometimes I felt tempted to return and beg for forgiveness, but each time I remembered their cold expressions and pressed on. Months went by, and slowly, I began to rebuild my life. I found a small, run-down house within my budget, and although it wasn't perfect, it was mine. I spent every free moment fixing it up, painting the walls, repairing broken windows, turning it into a place that felt like home. For the first time, I felt pride, a sense of accomplishment I had earned on my own. It wasn't easy. Loneliness often weighed heavily on me, and the silence of the empty house felt oppressive at times. But I refused to let it break me. I had come this far, and I wasn't going to let anything stop me. Just when I started feeling like I could finally move on, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find my parents standing on the porch, their expressions a mixture of determination and impatience. "We need to talk," my father said, leaving no room for argument. I stepped back to let them in, my mind racing with 1,000 questions. I hadn't seen them since the day they'd kicked me out, and I had no idea what they wanted now. I'd built this life without them, created a space that was mine alone. I wasn't certain I was ready to let them back in. They settled into the living room, glancing around as if assessing the place and appraising my progress. Finally, my mother broke the silence. "This house," she said, her eyes narrowing, "is part of the family. Yes, you may have purchased it, but it belongs to us. Without us pushing you out, you wouldn't have managed to afford it. In a way, we helped you, and now it's only fair that you give something back." A wave of anger rose in me, the same fierce resentment I had felt on my birthday. "This house is mine," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I earned it. I paid for it. You have no claim here." My father shook his head, a faint smirk spreading across his lips. "Don't be naive, Alex. We've always taken care of you, even when you didn't deserve it. This house is a family asset, and you're still part of this family, whether you like it or not." I felt my hands start to shake, a turbulent mix of anger and fear surging within me. They had taken everything from me, forced me to start over, and now they wanted to claim the only thing I had left, the one thing I'd built on my own. I took a deep breath, meeting their gaze with a determination I hadn't felt before. "You may have been family once, but not anymore. You made that choice the day you threw me out," I said firmly. "This house is mine, and I won't let you take it." They exchanged a look, a silent understanding passing between them, and I could see the anger in their eyes. But I didn't back down. I had fought too long for my independence, rebuilding my life from the ground up, to allow them to take it now. As they rose to leave, my mother gave me one last, cold look. "This isn't over, Alex," she said. "We'll be back." I watched them walk away, a heavy dread settling over me. I knew this was just the beginning, that they would return, determined to get what they wanted. But I also knew I was stronger than before, that I had carved out a life for myself that I would defend, no matter what it took. They had betrayed me once, but I wouldn't let it happen again. This time I was ready. This time I would fight back. Days passed after my parents' visit, but their words lingered, gnawing at the sense of peace I had struggled to establish. I tried to dismiss them, telling myself they were just empty threats, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they wouldn't let this go. They had already taken so much, and now they were after the last thing I had. I knew I couldn't allow that to happen. It wasn't long before their threats became tangible. I received a letter from a lawyer outlining their supposed claim to the house. Full of legal language, the letter made it clear they were prepared to go to court to fight for a home they hadn't lifted a finger to build. A surge of anger flared up, but beneath it was a creeping fear. They had money, connections, things I didn't. Could they really take my home from me? I realized I needed support, so I contacted a lawyer, recommended by a friend. After explaining everything, I sat in silence while she reviewed the letter, her brow furrowed in concentration. Finally, she looked up, offering a reassuring smile. "Alex, based on what you've told me, your family doesn't have a legitimate claim. You bought this house on your own, right? No shared ownership, no joint mortgage, nothing that connects them to it." Relief flooded over me as I nodded. "Yes, I paid for it alone. They didn't contribute a cent," she nodded, setting the letter aside. "Then they have no case. They can threaten legal action all they want, but it would only waste their time and money. That said, I can't guarantee they won't keep trying to intimidate you. Family disputes like these can get messy." I exhaled, the tension in my shoulders starting to ease. "Thank you." That's a relief, but the sense of relief was brief. Even if they had no legal standing, I knew my family. They wouldn't let something like the law deter them, and soon enough, their intimidation escalated. One evening, I returned home to find my front door unlocked, even though I was sure I'd locked it before leaving. My heart pounded as I stepped inside and found the living room in disarray, drawers pulled open, papers strewn across the floor, a shattered picture frame near the fireplace. My first thought was that I'd been robbed, but nothing seemed to be missing. Then, I noticed a note on the coffee table, written in my father's handwriting: "This house belongs to the family. Don't make us take it by force." A chill ran down my spine, a mixture of anger and fear settling over me. They had invaded my space, my sanctuary, sending a message as clear as day. They wanted me to feel unsafe, to second-guess myself, to wonder if this fight was worth it. But instead, their scare tactics only strengthened my resolve. I wasn't going to let them intimidate me. This was my home, my life, and I would defend it. The next morning, I found my car's tires slashed and graffiti sprayed across the fence. Reading Family First, rage boiled within me as I took in the damage, my mind racing with the implications. They weren't just trying to scare me, they were trying to break me. I called the police, filed a report, and added extra locks to my doors and windows. But even with these precautions, I felt an ongoing sense of unease, a lingering fear that they might strike again at any moment. Realizing that I needed more than just security measures, I began to document everything. I documented all the damage, saved the note, and kept a record of each incident. I knew that if they intended to pressure me, I needed to be ready to respond. It was time to face them directly, to look each one of them in the eye, and make it clear I wouldn't be intimidated. First, I went to see my father, finding him in his office, a place he always used to display his authority. I entered, feeling a mix of anxiety and anger, and waited for him to acknowledge me. When he finally looked up, his face showed mild irritation, as though I were merely a nuisance. "Alex," he said, his tone patronizing, "what brings you here?" "I'm here about the house," I responded, keeping my voice firm. "You have no right to it. I've spoken to a lawyer, you don't have a claim, and I won't let you bully me." He leaned back with a smirk. "You think a lawyer will scare us off? This is family business, Alex. Legalities won't protect you." I shook my head, meeting his stare with a newfound resolve. "No, this is my business, and I won't let you or anyone else take away what I've earned. I'm not that scared kid you threw out. I'm done letting you control me." For a moment, he simply looked at me, his face unreadable. Then he laughed, a cold, dismissive sound. "You're making a mistake, Alex. You think you can stand up to us? Let's see how long that resolve lasts." I left without another word, anger simmering beneath the surface. I knew he wouldn't back down, but I'd made my stand. Next, I went to see my mother, hoping she might be more reasonable. But when I arrived, she greeted me with the same cold expression I'd seen on my father. "You shouldn't have come, Alex," she said flatly. "You're just making things harder on yourself." I clenched my fists, struggling to keep my emotions in check. "Why are you doing this? Why can't you let me live my life?" She sighed, shaking her head. "We're trying to protect you, Alex. You don't understand how the world works. This house is more than just property, it's your place in this family. If you can't see that, then you're the one turning your back on us." Frustration surged within me, a desperate need for her to understand. "I'm not betraying anyone, I'm just trying to create a life for myself, one that's free from your control and expectations. I deserve to have something of my own." She looked away, her face hardening. "You'll regret this, Alex. One day, you'll see that family is all you have. And when that day comes, don't expect us to be there." Her words cut deeply, but I stood firm, refusing to let her see the pain they caused. I had expected as much, but hearing it out loud only strengthened my resolve. They weren't going to change, and I couldn't keep waiting for them to understand. Finally, I approached my siblings, knowing they'd been complicit in the intimidation. I gathered them together, hoping to appeal to their sense of fairness, to remind them of the bond we once shared, separate from our parents' influence. But their responses were hollow, filled with empty excuses and justifications. "We're just following Mom and Dad's lead," my brother said defensively. "They know what's best for the family." I looked at him, feeling a sting of betrayal that wouldn't fade. "What about what's best for me? Don't I deserve to have my own life?" He shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "It's not personal, Alex, it's just the way things are." And with that, I knew I was truly alone. They had chosen their side, opting for a path of control, manipulation, and fear. But I refused to let them dictate my life any longer. I had fought too hard, sacrificed too much, to give up now. Walking away from the last confrontation, I felt a surge of determination. I would defend what was mine, no matter the cost. They could threaten, intimidate, and vandalize all they wanted, but I wasn't going to back down. This was my home, my sanctuary, and I would protect it even from my own family. The moment I decided to pursue legal action, I knew things would intensify. My family had shown they were willing to go to any lengths to take my home, and I was done letting them control the narrative. If they wanted a fight, they would get one. My lawyer, Sarah, was meticulous and relentless, going through every piece of evidence I had to build a strong case. We gathered bank statements, receipts, loan documents, anything that traced my income directly to the house's down payment. Every paycheck I saved, every small expense I cut, all became part of the story we would present in court. They'll try to paint you as ungrateful, as someone who wouldn't have this house without them, Sarah warned, scanning through a stack of documents. But the truth is, you did this yourself, and we'll make that clear. I nodded, feeling a new wave of resolve. Let them try. I'm ready. As we prepared, my family wasn't idle. I began hearing from mutual acquaintances that they were spreading lies, claiming I'd deceived them out of what was rightfully theirs. They even found witnesses, people who were willing to swear my parents had provided substantial financial support. It was all false, of course, but I knew they were hoping to plant enough doubt to weaken my case. Then things escalated. One evening I returned home to find the front windows shattered, glass scattered across the floor. My heart sank as I absorbed the destruction, a silent reminder that they were still trying to scare me into surrendering. I called the police, filed another report, and began cleaning up, but the sense of violation lingered. The next day, as I was picking up the pieces, I noticed my neighbor, Mrs. Turner, watching from across the street. She was a kind, elderly woman who had always been friendly, and I could see worry etched across her face as she approached. "Alex, are you all right?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. "I've heard about what's been happening. Is there anything I can do to help?" I hesitated, an automatic reassurance ready on my lips, but then I realized I didn't have to face this alone. Maybe it was time to accept the support others were offering. I nodded, letting out a weary sigh. Honestly, I could use all the help I can get. My family, they're not going to stop. They'll do whatever it takes to make me give in. She placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "You're not alone, dear. We see what they're trying to do, and it's not right. If you need anything at all, just let us know," Mrs. Turner said, assuring me she'd keep an eye out and that others would too. True to her word, over the following days, neighbors I barely knew started stopping by, offering support, helping me document the damages, and staying alert for any unusual activity. It was a small army of community support, a network of everyday people standing against the intimidation tactics my family was using. One evening, a group of neighbors gathered at my house to brainstorm ways to protect the property and gather evidence for the court case. Mr. Thompson, who lived nearby, suggested installing security cameras to catch any further vandalism. Others volunteered to help set them up, and in just a few hours, we had a system that made me feel more secure than I had in weeks. With their help, I could concentrate on gathering even more proof for court. I searched through old bank statements, collected receipts for every repair and renovation I'd funded, and printed text messages showing my family's threats. Sarah, my lawyer, was thorough, ensuring each detail was supported, every accusation countered with solid evidence. "They'll try to paint you as ungrateful," Sarah said, "but we'll prove that you're simply standing up for yourself, that this home is something you earned through hard work and sacrifice. We'll make it clear this isn't about family, it's about control." Amid all this preparation, I found a strength I hadn't realized I had. Every day was a fight, but I wasn't alone in this battle anymore. My neighbors became a source of reassurance, reminding me that I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was standing for a community that had welcomed me. They saw my parents for who they truly were, beyond the lies and manipulation, and their trust in me became a lifeline in the storm. As the court date neared, I felt the tension building. I knew my family would be prepared, willing to go to any lengths to claim what they thought was theirs. But I also knew I had done all I could to defend myself. I had a group of people who believed in me, who knew the truth. The night before the hearing, I sat alone in my living room, the silence pressing down on me. I thought about everything that had led me here, the birthday betrayal that had forced me to rebuild my life from scratch. I reflected on the pain, the anger, and the resilience that had grown from that dark period. This house wasn't just a building, it was a symbol of my independence, the life I'd struggled to create. It represented every sacrifice, every ounce of determination I'd poured into proving that I could stand on my own. I wasn't going to let them take it from me. The following morning, I arrived at the courthouse with Sarah and a small group of neighbors who had come to support me. Across the room, I saw my family, their faces a mix of smug confidence and concealed contempt. They had brought witnesses, people who I knew would lie for them, willing to say anything to help them win. But I wasn't afraid. I had the truth on my side, and I was prepared to fight. The hearing was exhausting, with each side presenting their arguments and evidence. My family's witnesses testified, creating stories of how my parents had financially supported me, how they had supposedly helped me buy the house. But Sarah was relentless, cross-examining each of them, exposing the holes and inconsistencies in their statements, revealing the lies. When it was my turn, I laid out all the evidence I had gathered, leading the court through each document, each receipt, each message that showed my family's intimidation tactics. I described the vandalism, the threats, the ways my parents had tried to assert ownership over something they hadn't earned. As I spoke, I could see the judge's expression shifting from doubt to understanding. I knew he could see the truth, that this was more than just a family quarrel. It was a fight for my independence, for my right to live life on my terms. By the end of the day, I felt a sense of relief, as though a weight had been lifted. I had done everything I could, presenting the truth openly for all to see. Now, all that remained was to await the verdict. As we left the courthouse, my neighbors surrounded me, their faces filled with pride and encouragement. "You did well," Alex, Mrs. Turner said, squeezing my hand. "No matter what happens, you've shown them you're not afraid to stand up for yourself." I nodded, feeling a rush of gratitude for the people who had stood by me, who had given me the strength to face this battle. Whatever the outcome, I knew I had fought with everything I had, refusing to let them take what was rightfully mine. And as we walked away, I felt a new sense of hope, a belief that, regardless of the result, I would emerge stronger. This was my life, my home, and I was finally in control. The day of the final hearing arrived, carrying a mixture of tension and anticipation. I had prepared for this moment for weeks, reviewing each piece of evidence, every detail that would prove beyond a doubt that this house was mine. I knew my family would bring their best, but I was ready to face them and finally end this nightmare. The courtroom was filled with friends, neighbors, and even some curious onlookers who had heard about the case. My family sat across from me, radiating an air of calm confidence that seemed more like an act than real conviction. They were clearly putting on a show, hoping to sway the judge with a crafted image of a caring family just trying to reclaim what they felt was rightfully theirs. As the proceedings began, my parents took the stand, their lawyer questioning them about why they believed they were entitled to my home. My mother, ever the performer, spoke of family bonds and the sacrifices she had made, portraying herself as a caring parent who only wanted the best for her child. She even shed a tear, talking about how she had supported me through difficult times and was now hurt by what she called my lack of gratitude. When it was my turn to speak, I took a deep breath and looked around the room. I could sense my neighbors' quiet support, a reminder that I wasn't facing this alone. I then began to present my case. I spoke clearly and confidently, guiding the judge through each piece of evidence I had collected. I showed the bank records, demonstrating how every payment had come from my own accounts, and presented the receipts for the countless repairs and upgrades I had paid for myself. I provided the threatening messages describing the vandalism, the invasion of my space, and the harassment my family had used in a desperate attempt to make me back down. With every point I made, I watched the facade my family had built start to crumble. My father's face hardened, shifting from smugness to barely disguised anger, while my mother's crocodile tears faded, replaced by a cold glare whenever the judge wasn't looking. They hadn't anticipated that I'd come prepared with evidence that would dismantle their case. Finally, it was time for the closing statements. My family's lawyer made one last emotional appeal, attempting to portray me as an ungrateful child turning on the people who raised me. But I could tell the judge wasn't swayed. He had seen the evidence and heard the truth, and his expression showed he wouldn't be moved by theatrics. Then it was my turn. I stood up, looked directly at the judge, and said, "This isn't just about a house, it's about my right to live independently, free from manipulation and control. My family has tried to take something that doesn't belong to them, something I built with my own hands. I'm not asking for more than what I've earned. I'm here to protect what's rightfully mine." The judge nodded, taking a moment before delivering his decision. I held my breath, the room silent as everyone waited. Based on the evidence provided, it's clear that the property in question was purchased and maintained solely by Alex, he stated firmly. Therefore, I am ruling in favor of the defendant, granting them full ownership of the house. Additionally, I am issuing a restraining order to prevent any further harassment from the plaintiff's side. Relief washed over me like a wave. It was finally over. The judge's decision had given me not just the house, but the freedom I had fought so hard to secure. My family's attempt to control my life had failed, and now I was truly free to live on my own terms. As I left the courthouse, my family waited by the steps, their faces a mix of anger and humiliation. I could see the bitterness in their eyes, the resentment of a failed plan. But I felt only strength and resolve as I walked up to them, standing tall, meeting each of their gazes. "This ends here," I said, my voice unwavering. "I'm done with your games, your manipulation. You've tried to control me for too long, and I'm finished letting you have power over my life. You lost, and it's time to accept that." My mother scoffed, crossing her arms. "You think you've won? You'll regret this, Alex. One day you'll realize family is all you have, and when that day comes, you'll have no one to turn to." I met her gaze without flinching. "If family means betrayal, manipulation, and control, then I don't need it. I'm moving forward without you." For a moment they just stood there, the weight of my words hanging in the air. Then, one by one, they turned and walked away, their defeat evident in their faces. I watched them go, feeling a blend of relief and finality. This was the last time I would allow them to dictate my life, the last time I would bend under their expectations. As I turned back to face my friends and neighbors, I was met with smiles, handshakes, and encouraging words. Mrs. Turner embraced me warmly, her eyes filled with pride. "You did it, Alex. You stood up for yourself and you won." We returned to my home, where the neighborhood had gathered to celebrate. It wasn't a grand party, but it was full of laughter, warmth, and a sense of community I had never experienced with my own family. As we raised our glasses for a toast, I felt a sense of closure and peace. The battle was over, and I had emerged stronger, surrounded by people who genuinely cared. That night, as I stood on my porch, looking out at the house that was finally, unequivocally mine, I felt a sense of empowerment I had never known. The shadows of my past had lifted, and I was free to build a life on my own terms, no longer burdened by the expectations and control that once held me captive. The future was uncertain, but for the first time that uncertainty felt like freedom. I was ready to face whatever lay ahead, confident that I had fought for my independence and would never let anyone take it from me again. With a deep breath, I stepped back into the house, closing the door on the chapter that had defined so much of my life. It was time to start anew, to shape a future that was entirely mine. And as I took that first step, I knew I was truly free. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe now to hear new stories every day, and let us know what you liked most in the comments.